Hey everybody, I'm Jason Mefford and back with Brad Miller, and we are walking a spiritual path today. Again, I think we've shared this a little bit before with you, but a lot of times in these episodes, we don't know exactly what we're going to talk about. We get an idea, we have some flash of inspiration that comes through, and then we just start talking, right? And allow kind of spirit to come through us to share our experiences, stories, other things that feel like we're supposed to share with you. And today is no different. I know we've done a couple of episodes where Brad would pull a random card and then we just talk about it. And there's a couple of synchronicities that led up to that. And so Brad did pull a card this morning. But Brad, maybe if you want to kind of share um, because it wasn't just like this morning you were like, oh, I need to pull a card. There were some things that actually led up to it and actually aligned with some things I think that you experienced yesterday too. So maybe share just
Yeah.
so people can kind of see because we want people to also see, like we've talked about when things are
hmm
out of the ordinary or you're seeing things in twos or threes or fours, it means something, right? And so it means pay attention usually. And
hmm
so this is an example of us doing that with today's topic.
Yep. So oftentimes in the evening after I get my daughter to bed, I like to sit and sometimes listen to a podcast. Sometimes I will read, just kind of it's kind of time for myself to wind down. Sometimes, especially when the weather's nicer out, I'll go outside in the back deck and I'll sit and meditate. Maybe I'll have a little torch thing going on out there and something and just kind of enjoy stuff. And again, it's just kind of time for me. It's kind of peaceful time. So last night, as I was sitting, I was like, all right, what do I feel like I need to do? And I usually, again, go by kind of what I feel drawn to doing. And I was like, all right, I feel like I want to read a book. I want to read something. So I went and opened up my Kindle account, whatever, on my iPad. And one of the books that was on there, kind of the next kind of in line, was a fiction book dealing with someone who did things with tarot cards. It's like, okay, well, that sounds kind of fun. It must be something I got recently. I don't remember it being there, whatever. So I went to open it up and it was like, you purchased this book 2022. I was like, hmm,
3 years
okay.
ago.
So it's not maybe not as new as I thought it was on there, which is odd that it's actually placed this high in the list because normally
Well,
it's kind of
not a
chronological.
coincidence, right? Synchronicity, not a coincidence,
Right. So I'm like,
synchronicity.
all right, well, let's do it. So I started reading it and really get kind of got sucked into it and stayed up later than I wanted to reading this book, which happens sometimes. You just kind of, one of those you just kind of get sucked in and can't stop. So did that. At the very end of the book, again, said that this book talks about using tarot cards and things like the main character does. And at the very end of the book, they give the description of the Fool card. Okay, now I don't do anything with tarot cards. I do things with oracle cards, with, kind of, with spirit, animal medicine, things like that. But as far as tarot goes, I've never really been comfortable with kind of what the unknown behind it. Like what's there that's you're calling on and things. And so I've pretty much stayed away from it. I don't really know a lot about outside of just kind of what I've come across. So at the end of this book, they talk about the Fool card, and this is what they say about the Fool card. And then when I read it in the book, it kind of jumped out at me as like, I feel like this message is for me. And so here's what it says: what do you want to do today? Where do you want to go? The Fool is here to tell you that your adventures are only limited by your imagination, and you would do well to take the leap and see what happens, versus stay quietly at home, longing to explore the world but afraid to get started. The Fool not only says that everything will be okay, but that this adventure is yours to take, that you've got what it takes to see it through to its ultimate end and be all the richer for it. She says the Fool is naive, a dreamer, and well, foolish to believe that everything will be okay when he steps off that cliff. But the Fool knows that you first must leap if you want the net to appear. What adventures will you be taking next? So I was like, all right. So there's some meaning in there for me. Um, some things that I need to be working on doing as far as my adventure, kind of where my path is leading and things like that. Like, okay. So this morning now, trying to, I was like, all right, what do we need to um talk about today? Like, what's a topic that needs to come out in conversation today? And I always set an intention. I talk about, come up with a topic that's going to be beneficial or the best interest of myself, of Jason, of you as a listener, as the viewer. Um, and I allow what and needs to come out, what ideas come out. And as I'm kind of sitting there, I kind of feel like I need to pull a card. Okay. I know the tarot stuff has been kind of in the back of my head from last night. And I'm like, I just feel like I need to pick a card for some reason. Okay. We've not really picked a card for a while, and just something says, go ahead and pull a card and see what it says. So I did so this morning, as Jason said. And the card that I pulled this morning is this one. Hopefully you can see it. It is Cat-erpillar. So not like straight caterpillar, like, with a butterfly or something, but Cat-erpillar. Okay. Opportunity. And here's what the book says. The energy of Cat-erpillar appears, heralding a time of transformation and opportunity. Here you're being asked to revise your dreams. If it looks and smells familiar, step away from it for the time being. The new cannot emerge from the old, and the youthful and vital cannot emerge from the aged and sickly. Experiment and surprise yourself with what arises for you in this moment. Cat-erpillar is an invitation to test out a new strategy to get a different, better result. Remember that the definition of lunacy is continuing with the same thinking and behavior and hoping for a different outcome. It's time to break away from habitual responses, to surprise yourself and startle others, eliciting a smile or frown or look of awe from those around you. Do not wait for an invitation from life to practice a bit of outrageousness or for permission to do the unexpected. Any other response right now will lead to more of the same and no real change. Sometimes the most original response is no response whatsoever. Stand stock still, staring steadily into the eyes of the players in your drama, avoiding engagement until the moment is right. Cat-erpillar invites you to witness the story unfolding, knowing that deciding on the timing of your actions is as essential as finding the best move to make. And when you do act, let there be no doubt in anyone's mind of your determination and the power you unleash.
Mhm. So you can see the synchronicity between the Fool card and the cat or pillar, right? And so
Mhm.
again, it's one of these where it's like, oh, okay, pay attention, right? And what's interesting, and Brad, you kind of alluded to it, and I haven't told you yet either, but because I can't remember if we talked last week or it was the week before, but uh,
Mhm.
last week I actually got an idea to change strategy slightly in one of my businesses that I started working on, last week and this week. I haven't really told anybody about it yet,
Except for everybody listening. But that's
except for everybody listening. And by the time they listen to it, the strategies are already going to be going
Mhm.
because there's usually a few week delay, right? But what's interesting is, and that it came a little bit out of the blue, but not completely out of the blue. Because for me, I tend to be years ahead of the curve on a
Mhm.
lot of things that I see. And so I had dabbled with the strategy about it must be 2 or 3 years ago now, something like that. And all of a sudden the thought came back to my head again, but to do it in a different way than I had done it
Mhm.
before, because it was kind of clunky before. It didn't quite feel
Mhm.
right. We did it for I don't know, 6, 8 weeks, something like that. It just didn't feel right. But it came to me again. It's the same kind of basic concept, but doing it in a different way. And so, I've spent last week and this week kind of doing some things in the background to be prepared for it, so that I can start talking about it and kind of launching it. Guess what? Next week, which happens to be a new moon.
Mhm.
New moon on Monday, which,
Mhm.
astrologically, again, for people just basic, again, but Full moons are usually good times to release things that we want to release, and
Mhm.
new moons are usually good times to introduce new things that we would like to do.
Mhm.
And so that's just kind of a basic business related thing that card you pulled this morning kind of confirmed to me that I was on the right path in that way. And again, I've got lots of other things as you were reading that that I was thinking we could talk about. But how does it hit you? Because again, you pulled that this morning. I mean, what are some things that jump out to you or that mean something for you from it?
Well, like you said, it kind of goes back and corresponds to the um that Fool card that I read about last night, about kind of, it's time for your adventure. Choose the path you're going to be on. Um, Break free of your habits. You know, if you keep doing the same things, you're going to end up in the same thing. So if you want something different, a different outcome, you have to take different action. You have to do something different. Um, and then when you do decide to do something, make sure you actually do, like, go full into it. Don't just kind of halfway it or just kind of dip your toe out and test, but like actually, kind of um, jump in there. And, there's been, and I know we've talked about this in the past, but right now, kind of, I feel like I'm in a time of transition, um, that I don't know what the future exactly is going to hold for me. I've got some ideas of some things that I'm kind of drawn to, some things that I think are um, relevant, that are, kind of maybe calling that this is a certain way I want to go, but I don't know how things are going to happen, how it's going to get there. I've kind of taken a step here and there, kind of in that direction. Again, just kind of trusting that the path is going to lay itself out for me as I continue to go down it. And this to me just kind of confirms that that's the case, and that possibly things are going to be um, kind of speeding up a little bit. That maybe the path is going to become clear of here's what I need to start doing. You need to get going. Um, Today, my animal medicine card this morning was Beaver, which is the builder, which is about creating things.
Mhm.
And so again, that goes towards kind of again just one more confirmation of this um, idea of something happening here for me.
Well, I think it's interesting because cosmically, there's some things that are going on. This last month has been really kind of a slow time in general for a lot of reasons, but very soon it's going to start picking up and accelerate again. And it really kind of goes back to the law of rhythm, and we see this universal spiritual law of rhythm in a lot of things that are around us. So some of the easy ways to think about it is like if you've ever been to the beach and you're standing on the sand, what do the waves do? The waves come in and they go
Mm-hmm.
out. They come in and they go out. There's a rhythm to the waves coming in and the waves going out, and the waves coming in and the waves going out. And it's that way for us spiritually, it's that way for us in business as well. And so, one of the lessons, again, spiritually speaking, is to realize and acknowledge and be aware of the law of rhythm and not try to force something to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Again, imagine if you're standing there on the beach and you're like, damn it, I don't want the wave to go out. I want it to come in right now. Well, it doesn't happen that way, right? And so sometimes we're in the building phase. We're the little busy beaver and we're building and we're building and we're building and we don't see the results of it yet, right? Because again, if you're, I mean, I grew up in the construction industry. My dad was a contractor. You can't sell the house until you build it. And so there's a rhythm of the money, right? Even in that
Mm-hmm.
business, right? So you often have
Mm-hmm.
to get a loan, you have to invest, you put in time while you're building the house, right? And so that when you're putting out, you're putting out, you're putting out, you're putting out, and then it turns. and the money comes back in. And then you're investing, and you're spending money, and you're doing things, and you're building, and you're doing everything, and eventually, whew, then it comes back in, right? Where we all want it to be like, no, damn it, I should get a salary every week. Well, you don't do that as a self-employed person, right? I've been doing this long enough that, hey, I had a really good first 3 months of the year, and then it's been slow because that's normal, right? And what's going to happen? I'm building, I'm doing things in the background, I'm investing, I'm putting out, and eventually the rhythm is going to bring it back in, right?
Mhm.
And each time that we do it, we can choose to build in a different way, take a different strategy, be the crazy person, right?
Mhm.
It goes back to that old Apple commercial that I love, the crazy ones are the ones who
Mhm.
actually change the world, right? Because if not, everybody just does the status quo. And
Mhm.
what's the worst that's going to happen? You don't do it like that again, right?
Right, you learn something out of it in a
I
way.
I learned my lesson from that strategy 3 years ago. I didn't like how that felt. I didn't like that way, and so I just kind of tossed it out. And it's like, no, it's not the strategy that's the issue. It's how you were trying to do it, Jason. And it's time to do it again. Okay. Now, what's going to happen? I don't know. I have to have intention without expectation.
Hmm.
I may not see results that I may be hoping for from a business perspective, but it doesn't matter because the intention behind this strategy is not necessarily to make money. Hopefully there will be money made from it, but it's actually for kind of a bigger reason for the community and for the profession that I'm in, right? And so if it leads to money, wonderful. If it doesn't lead to money, wonderful, right? But if it's what I'm supposed to do and I do it in a little bit different way, um, then that's what it is, right? I'm
Hmm.
being true to the cat per pillar and the law of rhythm. So, so yeah, I think that, like I said, it's interesting. I think we both see some parallels in our lives,
Hmm.
to different things that way. And another thing that as you were reading through, it said that no response is sometimes the good
Hmm.
strategy to take. And what's interesting, because I've done this for a long time, but I had a friend of mine who was sharing some things, with me, uh, about what just happened to her over the weekend, and she chose not to respond, and now things are working out exactly the way they're supposed to. Right? At first, she was kind of freaking out, but no response, right, is also a good thing to practice, and I think it's um, business, but also spiritual, a good way to act. And so I'll give you a couple of examples to try to help explain this. I was taught a long time ago that just because the phone rings, you don't have to pick it up. Someone calling you is an invitation for you to talk to them, but you can choose to pick up the phone or not pick up the phone, right? If somebody sends you a text message, you can choose to respond or not respond. You can choose to be tied to that technology, like we talked about in a previous episode, and you're conditioned just like a Pavlovian dog that every time that thing dings or buzzes, you're like, oh, oh, oh. Or you can use it as a tool and it's like, hey, I'm busy right now. I'm going to get back whenever I'm going to get back. And so for a long time in my personal and business life, I have consciously chosen not to respond to messages, either delay my timing of the response
Hmm.
or not respond at all. And what I found is usually whatever first comes at me of, oh my gosh, it's a big emergency. I need your help right now, blah, 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 right? All those emotions I don't want to be in. if I were to respond right away, I'm jumping into that emotion. And so if somebody is throwing anger at me and I quickly want to respond, I'm most likely going to respond out of anger. And I don't want to do that. And, when people come at me with things like anger or need or worry or shame, a lot of times I just ignore it. And what's interesting is I found my benefactor does the same thing, right? When people come to him like, "Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, I need help, I need an answer right away." Guess what? He doesn't respond. He does
Mhm.
not respond. He gets the message. He does not respond. Why? Because he's not gonna jump into that same space. And what happens most of the time, little Tanal freaking out, we realize there's nothing to freak out about and it fixes itself anyway.
Mhm.
Right. And so, but I think it also, when we choose to, react quickly, it often puts us back in that third dimensional space that the person's probably coming from
Mhm.
instead of actually staying where we're at. Right. And, when my friend was sharing this experience with me, I'm like, well, because what had happened, she had these good experiences with two people where she stood in her power. It was kind of like fifth dimension type uh, interactions, and then all of a sudden, right, the next day or a few days later, both of these people came back at her from a third dimensional space, and she's like, "I'm so confused. I don't know what's going on," because they came up to her level, had that conversation, were in that frequency with her, right, during that conversation, and then they went right back into the 3D. And they came at her with anger and everything else, about these particular situations. She's just like, I'm so confused. I'm like, well, that's because, right, they dropped back into
Mhm.
the 3D. You going to drop back into the 3D with them and get back into anger with them and send stuff back and forth? Or are you going to stay where you're at?
Mhm.
And for me, I found it easier to stay where I'm at by ignoring
Mhm.
or having no response, right? Because not everything deserves a response. In fact, I have some friends that they have their process, they need to talk things out, they like to amplify things, right? Because that's their process for working it through. Ain't my process. I go sit on my porch and I think about peace and love, and it's all taken care of. That's my process. I go inside, I don't talk about it. Like I said, others of my friends, oh, they have to and amplify it. And it's like, fuck, after a while. But, I don't get caught into that because I don't respond. I get talked to. I'm holding space for them. But the whole time, I'm like, well, I don't agree with that. Well, you're a little off base there, but it's your process. Keep going. Okay. I'm saying this in my head, right? I'm not
Mhm.
saying it out loud to them, but there's no response. And a lot of
Mhm.
times these people will want me to agree with them. And I just say, okay, or, oh, I hear that. I don't agree with them if I don't agree with them.
Right.
I don't feed into their need to be right by patting them on the back and saying, "Oh, yes, this is righteous indignation and you need to take it out on this person." And, "Oh, yes, you're so right in what you believe."
Mhm.
Because that would only be feeding fuel to what they're trying to do, and it's like, I'm not going to do that. If you're going to be in anger and fear and anxiety, I'm not going to fuel it anymore. I'll sit here and listen if I need to, unattached, right? Objectively,
Mhm.
but I'm not going to feed into your ego of needing to be right by saying, "Oh, yes, Jason, of course you're right. That person is an asshole." Nope. I just sit there and go, "Uh huh, uh huh, okay, okay." And if their process takes too long, I find a way to get out,
Right.
right? At that point, because I'm willing to hold space for someone for a while if that's what they need, but only as much as I can do,
Mhm.
right? And I had that example yesterday with somebody, and it was like, after an hour, it was like, fuck, I can't take this anymore, right? And so I'm like, we were talking on the phone. I'm like, I needed to go to the bathroom and get my water. And so I excused myself, right, for a while. Now, when I came back, I don't know how long I was gone for it. I took my own sweet time,
Sure.
right? Uh, the conversation was different
Mhm.
the last few minutes because they had changed a little bit. They'd come down, they notched it back a little bit, right? Because I stepped away. And so to me, I think that idea of no response, I don't think a lot of people actually practice that, but it's very, very powerful, right?
Mhm.
The ancients, the shamans, the holy people have been doing this for a long time. If you go back and think about any of the masters or other people like that, that's how they acted too, for the most part, right? They just didn't let things stick to them, and they didn't get wet with what other people were saying. And if
Mhm.
somebody couldn't get out of their shit, then guess what? They got ignored in a nice way, right? Like, I know with my benefactor, there's a few people, because they've expressed this to me about how they were ignored by our benefactor for years because they weren't in the right space. They kept coming back with a certain energy, and they're like, well, I'm not going to deal with that right now. And so there would be like all these different, things that would happen to just make sure that, they were not physically available for a period of time while this person was, dealing with it. And it's been the same with me, right? If I come from a certain perspective, then I get ignored. And it's a lesson to me of, oh, just a minute. I didn't approach that the right way. Maybe I didn't have the right intention. Maybe I was coming from a different energetic space than I thought I was. And so it's always, good learnings for us to sit with. If somebody's ignoring you, maybe there's a reason. Maybe it's
Mhm.
something you're doing, right? And it's an opportunity for us to learn and grow. So,
Yeah. So I'll take what you just said and I'll maybe bring it down to a little bit of the 3D level. But this to me is boundaries.
mhm.
And this is something that's important not only in our personal lives, but also in our professional lives. Um, as a lawyer, I often have people call me and they think that the world is on fire, that there's an emergency that has to be dealt with right away, and that I have to drop everything to deal with them. And obviously that's their story that they're telling themselves, and that's what they're trying to impress upon me for whatever reason. Maybe they need to feel that someone's listening to them, or they're dealing with their stuff and trying to have me get into their world with them. But this is where boundaries are important because their emergency, as I like to say, your emergency is not my emergency. You know, just because something happened to you does not mean that that's an issue for me. You may have to deal with something here in the next 5 minutes. You brought it upon yourself. You've had plenty of time to do it, and I'm not going to all of a sudden drop everything so that I can meet this deadline that you've come up with now. I see this quite a bit on people who don't get back to me very quickly with stuff, and all of a sudden they're like, "Oh shit, I've got this deadline I need to hit. I need this right now. Can you do this right now? Can you review this document, for instance? Can you review this for me by the end of the day?" And typically my response is, "No, no, I
Mhm.
cannot.
Mhm.
Maybe I can get it done in the next day or two, but you've had 3 weeks to get this to me and to let me, and to have me look at this, and you're waiting to the very last minute to do it. And so, no, I cannot drop everything, and I'm not going to change my priorities, my life for you. And so it's the same thing that you're talking about sometimes you just kind of have to put up that wall, whether it's ignoring them or just politely saying, that's nice, but I'm not available right now for this. And I'm not available to read this document or to get this to put something together for you. Like you're gonna have to wait. And if that's a problem, I'm sorry, but you know,
Well, it's funny because here's real life 3D client related. So last week, kind of my leadership moment on our on a group membership call that I have with executives was around boundaries, around technology, around setting the
hmm
boundaries around technology, around, guarding your calendars and different things like that.
yep,
And then what's interesting is I don't remember which day it was. It doesn't matter. I have certain clients that have cell phone and text capabilities, right? Most people, you want me, you got to email me, and I'll get to you whenever. But some clients actually have kind of text and phone support as well. And so, this one person, we had just had a 30-minute one-on-one, answering some questions, going through some different things. And then it wasn't even a half an hour afterwards. I get a text that says, "Hey, can you call me? I have a follow-up question for you." Not a problem, right? But again, I was going to get back to this person when I had time. Just because they texted right away, I'm not going to be like, "Oh my gosh, I got to call them right now." No,
right.
I was
hmm
in meetings, I was working on other stuff. But when I had a break, right, I called the person, and guess what they said? "Oh, I already answered my question." Well, surprise, right? Surprise,
hmm
right? And we talked about something else for 5 minutes, and that was it. And then, I my sleep schedule is all wacky. But recently I've been waking up somewhere between 5 and 6 in the morning, no matter when I go to bed. And so I get up one morning and I usually have my phone turned off, but if I'm listening to certain recordings or doing some training, I have to turn my phone back on. I have to take it off airplane mode. And so I'm up. It's probably 5:15 in the morning. I'm sitting out on my deck, getting ready to listen to my training. My you do in the evening what I do in the morning. My own time for listening to things. And so I have to turn it on. All of a sudden, my text alert comes on. I'm like, oh, what is this? 4:17 a.m. my time. I get a text from this client who I had just talked to twice the day before.
hmm
Again, asking me a question that I could respond to in text. And so at that point, right, most people would have been like, oh my gosh, I better call them, right? Because 4:17 my time, because I'm Pacific, was it's still 7:17 in the morning Eastern time, but that's where the
hmm
person is based. And I could have called him right then, but I chose not to. And why did I choose not to? I don't want to train this person that every time they send me a text, I'm going to get right back to them
Yep.
because that's not what I do. I've got boundaries to set, and their bad behavior, if in a way, or their anxiety, maybe not bad behavior, but it's definitely anxiety on their part. Right? I'm not going to get into anxiety,
hmm
and so I got back to them. I planned to get back to them at 10 or 11 o'clock my time, but hey, I got busy. It was later in the
hmm
afternoon, when I actually texted back. But I think, again, it's a 3D example, but it affects us spiritually too, right? Because the more we are like having to knee-jerk react to everything, it's
Hmm.
pulling us into the anger, the anxiety, the whatever the other person is doing, where just having no response or delaying your response allows you to stay centered, or
Hmm.
maybe you get amped up when something comes through, right? This is one of the reasons why I started doing this a long time ago in corporate America, because when I would get an email that would really piss me off, I knew what would happen if I would respond when I was pissed off.
Hmm.
I might have been right, but I was going to escalate it. And somebody want to fight with me? Oh, baby, I can fight. I can throw lightning darts like you would not believe.
Little Zeus
But
action there.
very much Zeus action. Um, but I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to
Hmm.
respond from that place, not just because it would make things more difficult for me by escalating it, but I didn't want to respond from that place. And
Hmm.
so I kind of had the boundary that a lot of things I would give it the night. I would get some email that would piss me off, and I'm like, okay, I'll deal with that tomorrow. And I would sleep
Hmm.
on it. I'd come back in, when I wasn't feeling that way, I'd read it again because maybe my ego got in the way and I was misreading something. But then I could always, respond instead of react. I was
Hmm.
responding from a better place. And so, I think it's again, it's true in our business life and our personal life, but also it has a tie to us spiritually because it affects our emotional and spiritual well-being as well. And
Hmm.
sometimes the best course of action is just wait or do
Yeah.
nothing.
Hmm. Yeah. This is a problem, or I should say, this is something my daughter is working through right now. She tends to be very emotional about things and then often makes very sudden decisions, actions based on kind of that emotion or the reaction that she has.
Mhm.
So right now we're getting to the end of the school year, and so for next year, she has the opportunity to be in the band, to play an instrument. And so her options are you can either be in the band, and then obviously you've got to figure out what instrument you want to play, or there's a kind of general music class for everybody else.
Mhm.
And so for a while, she was very excited about band and trying to get instruments, and she'd go from one to the other. And she decided she wanted to do trombone.
Oh, that's a good one.
I was like, okay,
Most people don't pick that, but that's a good instrument.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's good, and it fits. And honestly, it fits her personality because she is definitely has a dramatic flair to her, and I think it's to be a good fit for her. But then at some point, then she's like, well, maybe I want to do percussion instead, or maybe I want to do the saxophone. So then she had to go back in and talk with the director and try some instruments out again. And she's like, okay, yeah, it was a trombone, whatever. But she kind of got in her head and was starting to get kind of like, well, maybe I should do this and maybe I should do that and started overthinking it. And then she decided that, so she had her last, we're kind of the end of the year, so her last kind of music classes for this year. And then she got really sad because she wouldn't see that teacher because that teacher would be teaching the music class and not the band next year. And so then she decided, well, I don't want to do band anymore. I want to do this music class because I want to be with this other teacher again. So totally going based on the emotion of I miss this teacher. I want to be able to have class with her again or whatever, as opposed to like band is a new opportunity. It's a chance to do something different. Kind of what we talked about here with this cards,
Mhm.
to try a different path and see what you like. You try it for a year, and guess what? You don't like it, go back to something different. Choose a different path. Um, but she tends to do that when she has something, an emotion comes through, whether it's fear or excitement or nervousness, anxiety, whatever. And then she'll kind of all of a sudden just switch everything and change direction and follow that emotion. And so this is something that working with her through, um, because it's causing her to change her mind constantly and take take actions that might feel right at the time because it's following whatever this emotion or response is, but aren't really in her long-term best interest. Um,
Well, I think this is it's interesting because this also gives us kind of a spiritual exercise for people um, that they may not realize. You know, obviously, if we can distance ourselves or step aside, have no response for a day or no response at all, that's great. But sometimes, we're kind of stuck in the middle. And just like your daughter, we all tend to make our decisions based on emotion, not based on logic.
mhm,
And this happens all the time. It's psychological in nature. People do all of this research and they tend to use biases to justify the research to do what they want to do emotionally anyway.
mhm,
Or they will do all the research and make a decision and then change it at the last minute for an emotional response,
mhm,
right? Just like that. Oh no, I want music because I want to be with that teacher, right? That's more important. And
mhm,
and we're all that way, but this is one of those where people talk about getting centered and getting grounded. And so, if we can get out of the emotion and get centered
mhm,
and grounded for just a brief time, doesn't take a whole lot, right? And you can get there in a lot of different ways. A very good way to do it is to take a very deep breath and let it
mhm,
all out,
mhm,
right? Doesn't take very long, but literally, don't believe me, try it. But, if you're going along in your day and all of a sudden you stop and you're consciously aware of your breath and you take the biggest breath in that you have all day and you slowly let it all out, see how you feel. You will feel
mhm,
different than you did the minute before you took the breath. And so, the more that we can become aware of, hey, hold it, I'm in a place where I don't want to be right now. Let me just breathe. Let me practice on, centering, grounding. It can be lots of other things. You could carry a palm stone crystal with you.
mhm,
Maybe you touch that, or, you I actually do some really weird things. Like I shake like a dog sometimes to try to clear stuff. So I actually go, how a dog
mhm,
kind of shakes things off. And sometimes I'll do that. I mean, there's lots of different ways, but the whole idea is the exercise, the practice is to help you get out of the emotion, get back to being centered and aligned. Because the minute that we do that, and then you ask yourself, what do I really want? What do I really think? What's in my highest and best interest? How do I really want to respond if
mhm,
I do? Right. And at that point, taking the time to just slowly get yourself centered. Maybe it's taking your shoes off. I don't know, right? There's lots of different ways to do it, whatever works for you. But making those decisions or responding from that place of being aligned and centered and grounded is a spiritual practice. And
mhm,
the more you practice it, the easier it gets, right? Some people, again, it's like monkey mind, chatter, 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 and they'll go hours staying in that. Again, I'm nobody special, but I've been practicing this for a long time. And when I get the monkey chatter, guess what? It is gone very quickly because I have learned when I become aware of it, some things that I can do. And all of a sudden, I'm back to aligned and centered and grounded. And that is not in my awareness anymore. But it takes practice. It takes practice in doing it. But it's something again that's very simple. You can do it with anything and everything that you're doing. Things come up at work, things come up in your personal life, things come up in your own mind, right? It doesn't matter. Any of those things, you can stop and just do something, even if it's and they can be things that people don't even need to see, right? It's not like you're in the middle of a business meeting, conference room full of people, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, just a minute, I have to go into my special place, right? And you do like some hand gesture and close your eyes. No, it can be as simple as training yourself to go, pick up your drink.
Mhm.
Now, except for me accentuating my breath, which hopefully came through in the audio, if I were just to do that, would you have any idea what I'm doing? No. And so we all can incorporate little things like that, into what we're doing. For me, shaking like a dog, that's effective. It's very effective and it's very quick. But if
Well,
I'm
you sound like a sore thumb when you do it. So,
exactly. So if I'm in a business meeting, if I'm on a Zoom call with somebody, I'm going to choose a different way of doing it. But if I'm by myself, I'm going to shake like a dog because I know that works and it works right away for me. For me, there might be other things, right, that work better
Mhm.
for you. But I think it's a good way to kind of end up, this discussion of yeah, be the fool, be the cat or pillar, right? Try something different, do something different. And something is outside Brad's window because I can see shadows.
something
Some,
flew in front of the screen.
somebody's visiting. Uh
If you don't know what we're talking about, go back, I think, 2 weeks ago to the episode, and you will see what we're talking, and you will figure out what we're talking about.
yeah. So anyway, with that, try things, don't feel like you have to respond. Sometimes no response is the best thing to do. And start practicing some of these different ways for you to be able to get back, to get centered, to get aligned, to get grounded, whatever you want to call it, right? Because that is the spiritual work.
Right.
People think it's so simple that that's not what it is. That is the work, right? Because every time you don't get into your anger and take it on somebody else and approach it from a place of love or some other
Mhm.
higher frequency, you're changing your right light being, you're changing the people around you, you're changing the world. That is the spiritual work. And there's little things that we can do. We gave you some examples,
Mhm.
to get yourself more aligned, more centered, more grounded in everything we do. Because the more we do that and the more that we spend time in that space, right, the better it is for everyone, everything, all the sentience, all the non-sentience, all the, cosmic brothers and sisters, star brothers and sisters, everybody,
Mhm.
when we do that.
Yep.
So with that, go out, have a great week, everybody, and we appreciate you. We love you. We're grateful that you're listening, and we'll see you on our next video.
See ya.